70s, men's tennis was in desperate need.
Stolen from a West Los Angeles public storage facility that might produce moderate anemia in certain people.
This won his first Grand Slam in 1990 at the age of 19. During his dominance and the US Open, the Australian matches were competitive and could have
picked it up. Couldn't quite control it, but that flew really swiftly.
Where Agassi is when he does this, he's behind the baseline. Normally you can't pull that off at all.
He was 29 at the time of his marriage, had amassed a fortune of $39 million. He was away from the scene for 3 years before resurfacing in 2006, Wales the next year with Roger Federer, Andre Agassi, and Rafael Nadal taking countryside. Pete has significant political ties as well, successful man in Grand Slam history. Pete played another exhibition double.
30 love.
30 love, just like this.
to his career, but when you watch him play, you just know he's unstoppable. Soon joined the club to really figure out if Pete would excel in this.
There is a specific feeling you get when you realize mid-match that you are not going to win, not that you might lose, not that it is going to be difficult, but that it is already over and the scoreboard just has not caught up yet. I felt that feeling against many opponents over the course of my career, but with Pete it came earlier than with anyone else. Sometimes before the second game was even finished. He had not done anything dramatic. He had not broken me. He had not hit some impossible shot. He had simply served twice and volleyed once, and something in my brain already knew how this afternoon was going to end. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. Pete Sampras was not the kind of player who announced himself. No fist pumping, no screaming, no turning to the crowd. He walked onto the court and he looked almost bored. Like he had already played this match 100 times in his head and he knew exactly how it was going to go. And the terrifying thing is that he was usually right. You prepared for weeks. You studied his patterns, you worked on your return, you got your fitness to the highest level it had ever been. And then Pete showed up, and within the first few games you started to understand that none of that preparation had prepared you for the actual experience of standing on the other side of the net from him. The serve. I have to start there because everyone who played Pete starts there. And I know that sounds predictable. Everyone knows Pete had a great serve, but knowing it and facing it are two completely separate experiences. He could hit the tee on the deuce side at 130 miles an hour and you would not touch it. Fine, you respect that, you account for it. But then the next point he hits the exact same motion and the ball goes wide by 1.5 feet and you are already leaning the wrong way. Same toss, same motion, completely different ball. And then the next point he hits it at your body at a slightly different pace, and now your racket is jammed and the return goes nowhere, and he is already at the net putting the volley away before you have finished processing what just happened. That is not just a powerful serve. That is a weapon that makes everything else on the court harder because you are never fully settled, never fully ready even when you think you are. I want to talk about the forehand because I do not think people give it enough attention. Everyone focuses on the serve, the volley, the athleticism, but that forehand, he hit it with so much topspin from an open stance and he could redirect it at the last possible second. You think you have read it, you think you know where it is going, and then the ball ends up somewhere completely different. I adjusted my positioning specifically for his forehand in our matches. I moved deeper behind the baseline to give myself more time. And Pete just hit it heavier and higher so that even from deeper I was still jammed. He was always one adjustment ahead of whatever I tried. Here is what I think separated Pete from everyone else in his era and maybe from almost everyone who ever played the game. He had no weakness that you could actually exploit under pressure. Every player has something. A second serve that gets tentative in tight moments. A backhand that breaks down when the match is on the line. A movement pattern that gets slower in the fifth set. Pete had none of that. His second serve was almost as dangerous as his first. His backhand slice was so heavy and so low that you could not do anything with it. His fitness was extraordinary, and his mind was completely still under pressure. The bigger the moment, the more relaxed he seemed. That is not normal. That is not something you can train into a person. That is something they are born with. I beat Pete a handful of times in my career, and I am going to be completely honest about what those victories felt like. They did not feel like I had outplayed him. They felt like I had survived him. There is a difference. When When you outplay someone, you walk off the court knowing you were the better player that day. When you beat Pete, you walked off the court knowing that he had played well and you had somehow found a way through anyway. And even as I was shaking his hand, I was always aware that if we played that same match again the next day, the result might be completely different. That awareness never went away. Even in victory, there was no moment where I thought I have figured this out. I had simply won today. Tomorrow was a different question. Wimbledon was something else with Pete. I need to separate that from everything else I have said. Every great player has a surface, a tournament, a stage where they become something beyond what they already are. For Pete, that place was Wimbledon and specifically center court. The moment he walked onto that court, something changed in him. It was not visible exactly. He did not look different. He did not move differently, but you felt it from across the net. A certainty, a complete absence of doubt. I had matches against Pete on hard courts where I felt I had a real chance from the very first game. At Wimbledon, I never felt that, not once, not in any match we played there. He owned that court in a way that I have never seen any player own any surface, and I do not think I ever will again. The volleys are not talked about enough. People remember the serve, and they forget that what made the serve so deadly was what came after it. Pete did not just come to the net. He arrived at the net in exactly the right position every single time. The angle he chose to approach from the depth, he gave his approach shot the way he split-stepped at the exact right moment. It was technically perfect. And then the volley itself, he did not overhit it. He did not go for too much. He placed it into a corner that was just barely reachable if you ran your absolute fastest, and even when you got there, you had no angle to pass him from. I spent entire practice sessions working on passing shots specifically for Pete, and in matches, I hit some of those passes perfectly, and he got them anyway. That taught me something about the difference between what you can do in practice and what Pete Sampras could do in a real match on a real court when the points actually mattered. There was a match I want to tell you about. I was playing well, real confidence. I had won the previous 2 sets and I was up a break in the third. Everything was working, my serve was landing, my returns were deep, I was doing everything the way I had planned. And then Pete had one single game where everything he touched was perfect. The serve was unreachable, the forehand was landing on the lines, the volley was going into spaces that did not look like they existed. And after that one game, something shifted in me, a small doubt, just a small one, and Pete felt it. I do not know how, but he felt it. And from that moment, the match turned completely. That is what the best players do. They do not wait for you to collapse. They find the exact moment when you are almost at your best and they push just hard enough to create the crack. Pete was better at that than anyone I ever faced. His legacy is different from the others. With Jimmy, it was the fight. With John, it was the genius. With Andre, it was the drama. With Pete, it was the silence. The complete absence of everything unnecessary. No celebration that was too big. No complaint that lasted too long. Just tennis, point after point, game after game, set after set, match after match. Grand slam after grand slam, 14 of them over a career that never had a visible peak because he never had a visible low. People asked me many times over the years who the greatest player was. I always said something careful, something diplomatic. But when I am being completely honest with myself, there is a version of that answer that begins and ends with Pete Sampras on a grass court in July. Because what he did at Wimbledon, what he sustained over that entire decade, was not just great tennis. It was something that looked at the time like it would go on forever, like it could not be stopped, like it was simply the natural order of things. And then one day it ended. And we all understood for the first time that we had been watching something we would never see again.